I love how being in the energy of synchronicity works for us. So when synchronistic events are happening, it's a sign that you're in alignment with your higher self. That's what that means. So if anyone here, I mean, we all experience it, not everybody recognizes it. But if you are having moments in your life where things just seem to line up, and a lot of times as humans, we start to try to look for the meaning, or we question it, or we second guess it. If we can move past doing that and we can just kind of observe and allow and kind of notice those things that seem to be connected or seem to be synchronistic, even if we don't understand it in the moment, it's often revealed later on. But when we get into those moments, it's actually this moment of alignment with our higher self and our higher beings where we have a higher frequency and a more powerful energy to then continue to stay on that co-creation pathway. And so I always love that. I always love that. So this morning I woke up, I was not feeling well, but I was like stretching on my bedroom floor on my rug, and I was using my essential oils, and I was, just laying there, and I called in the angels and I called in Archangel Uriel, and immediately felt this just huge presence move over my aura and my body. And so, did my practice that I often do, got up, happened to check my email, and had a question from one of my longtime clients who I believe is not able to be here tonight because she has another commitment. But she was asking me a question about the last week's recording that I had just sent out. And so I love that because to me, I'm like, oh, it's just always the sync of energy. So the fun thing for me working with the angels is I've shared with you guys that they are very passionate about me doing this Sunday evening angel connection. And I'll tell you about 5 o'clock my time, because I'm on mountain time. My energy, it was like nothing. I was like, I wasn't even ill today. Nothing. It was like everything just came back up. And that is the power of frequency, and that is the power of angels. And tonight they actually gave me, when I had tuned into this morning, some things they wanted to more specifically address or talk about. And so if you got my reminder email, you probably saw some of that. But that's what we're going to dive into tonight. So thank you for being here. So just as a reminder, this first part, I work on tapping in with my angels, my guides. If you would like me to filter any messages or translate any messages in a collective way, just by being here, you've brought that collective energy tonight. But if you would like to have more specific clarity that creates an aha moment for you, you can mentally give permission to your angelic guides, your spiritual guides, to also communicate and relay with my angelic guides. And then, of course, as always, we're working with the archangels to bring that collective energy in as well. So in the first part of tonight, I will work on channeling their message, their information, their energy. And then the second half, if there are questions, things that you would like to ask, be addressed, know that if it's something maybe you don't feel comfortable with, you can always email me like my client this morning did. So I'm going to bring in her question tonight, and they're already going to address that. And the interesting thing is they had already told me what they wanted to address before she asked the question, which was literally in alignment with what they wanted to address. And that's how angels often work. They know what's on your mind. They know where your energy is. They know what you're working on. They know your pleas and your cries for help and your wishes and your wants and your desires. And their job is to fulfill that for us. We have been conditioned to believe that it is selfish if we have desires, wants, things that we need. It doesn't matter how small or how large. The angels in the universe go to work to give us all that we want and we desire. The reason we most often do not get that is because we do not know how to line up with it. We don't know how to get in alignment with what we've asked for. And so that's a lot of what they'd like to talk about tonight. Because I work with and have talked to the angels my entire life, and I want to say subscribe, which seems like a funny energy, but it's kind of subscribe to their energy and their alignment on a very regular daily basis and in multiple aspects of my life every single day. Sometimes it appears less communicative than if you watch people who channel. People who channel, they go really set their own soul's consciousness aside and become a conduit directly for another energy or entity to come through. and speak, which is why it often sounds different. In the early years of when I worked with the angels, it would come through differently. And I think some of that was probably based on my belief system. Many of us begin our introduction to angels through religious context. All religions, or I should say, most major religions, especially ones based on Christianity, but even other religions that are non-Christian based, have a belief in angels, have texts within their religious texts that speak to angels. And so for many people, we learn about angels from a religious or a religious text context. And so in my early days, the angels sounded very different from myself when they would come through. They would speak in a more archaic terms. The voice would sound differently. But today, in today's world and modernity of my relationship with the angels and my understanding of the angels, which has grown expansively, I understand angels to be light frequency or light beings, which is what they indeed are. They're a frequency. They are a very high frequency. They are the highest frequency of all beings that we could be in contact with and channel. Their messages are always filled with love and guidance and wisdom. They're always going to communicate from a space of making everything seem beautiful. They don't have negative context in the way that they speak to us. They see everything as beautiful and perfect and always working out for us. And that's the energy and the message that they bring in. So I always tell people, if you're working on communicating with your angels and you feel negative, you feel fearful, you feel like it just makes you feel unsettled or uncomfortable, it's not angels, because literally because their frequency is such a high frequency, they do not have the ability to impress upon you any of those other feelings. It's like those feelings completely go away. So if you've been working on communicating with your angels, you will know when you are in feeling with them, when you are in alignment with them, because you feel, even if it's slight, a little bit lighter. Okay. So I just want to reiterate that every time that we talk about the angels, because it's very important to understand that this is a very high energy, high frequency relationship, and you should always feel very good when you're in the energy or the presence of the angels. So with that being said, they're telling me, let's get started. So tonight they want us very specifically jump into addressing whether or not the angels are hearing your pleas for help. And they very specifically put it in the terms of pleas. There are other words that we could use there, but there are times, whether we're verbal or we're mental, about really we get into these places where we feel like we need help, whether it's financially, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's within our own self. Perhaps we're carrying heavy loads of responsibility. Maybe we've had a lot of trauma that's occurred in our life. And sometimes people look at trauma and people will say, I've never had anything really that bad happen to me. How can I still be holding trauma in my body? And the thing that angels want to remind you of is trauma looks like a lot of different things for different people. Yes, there are people who go through what we as humans, if we can look out at the world, would consider very terrible things. And that is definitely trauma. But there is a lot of types of trauma. There are a lot of types of trauma that we can go through as humans on this planet. Even if your life felt pretty normal or pretty good in context or in comparison to other people or other things that you maybe are of witness to, we build up trauma in our body anytime that our nervous system is dysregulated, anytime that we are out of balance, anytime that we've had to go through really difficult things. In fact, a lot of times when we look at single mothers who are raising children, that can create a lot of trauma within the nervous system. It can create trauma from just a struggle, a sense of feeling alone. Like there's a lot of things that can create or cause feelings of what we believe to be trauma. And so the point of all of this that they want to address is that we have they're using the word delicate way of minimalizing our own self and feeling like we should be stronger or we should be able to deal with this or we should be able to do things differently. And the things that the angels want to remind everybody of is that we go through the difficulties of this life for a feeling of contrast or a feeling of duality, which I feel like they talked about a lot last week. But this idea that as co-creators, we came to planet Earth knowing that the path could be difficult in certain aspects of our life. And it's not that we want to avoid the difficulty, because in part, the difficulty is what actually allows us to gain greater understanding, greater empathy, greater acclimation to planet Earth and Earth life, and is part of that evolution of spiraling upward on a soul level, of where when we have experienced difficult things, it often leads to a lot more compassion and understanding with other people who are going through difficult things. What they really want to impress upon each one of you is the ability to take yourself out of the difficulty. It is a very much conditioned context that we live here in planet Earth, where we believe that if we've done things that we perceive as harmful, or we feel guilty about, or we've been conditioned to be made feel guilty about, that we lose our self-worth, we lose our deserving, we lose our ability to tap into the greater higher self and our angels and our spiritual guides simply through a frequency, which means that we take ourselves down in these notches of energy frequency. When we come in as infants into Earth life, our frequency is incredibly high because we've just crossed over. Our soul is pure, it's clean, it's crossed over. Of course, when we come into a context of whatever family relationship that we've decided to come into. And just because we come into a family doesn't necessarily mean that we need to take on all the elements of that family or all the elements of what that might look like. Some people come into very loving, gentle homes. Some people come into very difficult situations. It wasn't intended that we came in and absorbed everything from that environment, but it was intended that we came in and the things that were pertinent to our soul blueprint, the things that we wanted to experience in this lifetime in order to help us evolve and grow, we actually chose to do that before our birth, in our blueprint, in our plans. And that sometimes can be a challenging thing for people to accept, especially if they had had difficulty in their early years. It seems a little bit, oftentimes the words I want to use are not the words they allow me to use because I'm translating here. Feelings, the word I want to say, I don't even know if it logically makes sense, but it feels a little redundant that we would come into this difficulty. Why would we come into difficulty when I'm telling you that we are these very high frequency spiritual beings that are worthy and deserving and unconditionally loved and unconditionally accepted regardless of our life? And the answer is because we were already spiritual beings living in perfection. We came into this context as part of almost like a spiritual evolution or collective consciousness of experiment to simply live out more generously the context of physical permeation is the words that they use, meaning that we can physically experience, feel, and have these visceral experiences in spirit that we are having here on physical planet Earth. And part of coming into this is knowing that in the end, we return back to our spiritual perfection. Some people come in and they live a life of suffering, and that really is a mental, emotional, spiritual choice that they are making for whatever the evolution their soul is trying to go through. And also because we become part of a collective consciousness that wants to experience certain things. So I feel like they've told us this before, but if we come in with this cause of wanting to help children who are suffering, then the universe has to create children who are suffering in order to meet that cause. If we want to come in and help people who maybe they don't have homes, maybe they're living on streets, maybe they're very poor, maybe they're very ill. If we come in with this collective energy of wanting to help with those conditions on this planet, then those conditions have to then be made present in order for us to come in. A higher, less conditioned way of looking at life and coming in is simply understanding that people choose the experiences on some level that they're experiencing, and that we can come in as collective guides. This is part of our collective consciousness, coming in and being able to help resolve that for people, but we look at it differently. Instead of looking at maybe the suffering part of it, we look at the potentiality, the transformation. So this energy that they give to us, this wisdom that they say to us, is the same way that we must look at our own life, meaning that if you have difficulties in your own life, Instead of looking at the difficulty, you have to look at finding the solution. You have to look at the solution because the solution is already there. And this is something that the law of attraction teaches us, that the angels talk about, that a lot of spiritual guides and channelers will talk about as well, that whenever you go through something unwanted, something difficult, something in your life that challenges you, immediately the answer, the solution to the problem will exist in the universal flow. It is important in order for you to then align with the solution that you're asking for. You don't even mentally have to ask for it. You simply are asking for it on a spiritual basis based on going through something difficult. So let's use a very simple example. Let's say that I'm driving somewhere and I get a flat tire. As soon as I get a flat tire, my conscious desire and wish, whether I even really think about it or not, is that I want my tire to be reinflated or I want a new tire so I can continue on my journey. If that happens to me, the instant that the tire goes flat, the desire for the new tire, a tire that works well, an inflated tire, is presented to the universe, and that solution is already in the works, meaning that the universe is collecting cooperative components in order to deliver that to me. Now, my human mind thinks, well, I have to get on a cell phone, I have to call AAA, I have to call, roadside service, I have to go buy a new tire. Like, we have all of those elements from our human perspective that we think we have to do in order to get the new tire. But the reality is the new tire has already been collected in the cooperative components and it's being delivered to us in the path of least resistance. Yes, we do have to take action because it's part of the simulation, right? It's like if you are playing a video game, for any of you out there that might like to play video games or you have gamers in your life, it's like, well, when we sit down and we play the video game, it's a virtual reality, really, but we're doing certain components to get into certain levels or stages of a game for that to be able to move on. And it is a very similar experience. It's just more visceral and more contextual as humans, but it's the same situation. Like, there could be 40 paths to get a new tire for my vehicle, but if I willingly just stay in this space of belief and trust, the path of least resistance will come very quickly, and the tire will come to me in the path of least resistance very quickly. Hopefully that begins to get you thinking and resonating with, well, what does that look like for the problems I'm dealing with in my life? The answer to the problem could come in hundreds of different solutions. But the path of least resistance is the path most likely for it get to you the most quickly in order for you to have the less suffering. But a lot of us as humans don't believe in that pathway, but we believe it must be a struggle, it must be hard, we have to get emotional, we have to get upset, we go into fear, we don't know how it's going to happen. Like, there's all these other scenarios that can happen where people actually then put in blocks of resistance that slow down the ability for the universe to answer. And that happens in every single aspect of life for humans on this planet. So the answer, you have to love the angels. They sometimes are very indirect in the way that they explain things, and they like to storytell sometimes. But the answer is, do the angels hear your pleas for help in whatever context they come? It's resounding yes. In fact, they have already anticipated what you will need before you even know that you need it. And I could give you thousands of examples of this from my own life, from my family's life, from my friend's life, from my client's life. I'm not going to do that in this context here tonight, but they will anticipate, because you have to remember that time is not linear like we think it is. Space-time reality is convoluted. So they have already anticipated the right set of circumstances for you to get to the next level of your life. But the reason why it feels like they're not always answering you is because your job is to line up with the solution, and not just the solution, but the path of least resistance to the solution. Okay. An example I think a lot about is a lot of people. So here's what I would like to say about this. So if this is from Erica's human perspective, or Erica's wisdom for a moment, you will see people in life taking really difficult paths because their belief has conditioned them to where they believe that that is the path that they must take. And I always think of it like something I'll use a lot as an analogy with my students or my clients is it's like you're walking down a path and you've got this path of like, whatever, we'll say 4 feet across this path. You're walking through forests and trees in this unknown territory, and you come across this huge boulder and it's big. It feels impossible to scale. But many people will come to that and simply say, how am I going to climb over this boulder? How am I going to get over that? And they'll stand there and they'll think about it and they'll struggle and they'll do whatever, when in actuality they could just choose to walk around the boulder and get to the other side, right? And that's kind of like what we're dealt with, those kind of difficulties or faced with that every single day in our life, that sometimes because we're told we have to go specifically on this path and then an obstacle comes and we believe that our job is to resolve the obstacle or climb over the obstacle or remove the obstacle. So people will, how do I push it out of the way? Can I climb up it? It seems too smooth. I don't have enough strength. Like we'll just sit there when maybe the obvious answer is like, I don't even need to deal with this obstacle. I can just choose to go around it and go on a different path. But we have a lot of fear in doing that because maybe that path is unpaved, or maybe that path is unknown, or maybe we don't feel like we have enough information. And the benefit of working with your angels and guides is, regardless of the path you choose to go on, including standing there and trying to get over that huge boulder, they will align and help and support you. But your angels will continually say to you, path of least resistance, go around the boulder, go around the boulder, go around the boulder. And all of the time we get guidance. Every single day we get guidance in our life that tells us to just like deviate, right? Maybe we're dealing with a difficult person, a difficult job, a financial situation, a choice, whatever it is. And we have the ability to unplug and just go a different path. But because we have very set beliefs as human, we stay and we struggle. And the reason why you don't always feel like the angels or your spiritual guides or higher self are answering the pleas to the things that you are asking for and you'd like to resolve isn't because they're not listening and they're not answering and they haven't provided a solution, but it is because your own beliefs don't always allow you to see the solutions that they're offering. This is why the angels, coming back in, by the way, are telling you that when you do things like practicing self-awareness, self-observation, meditation, yoga, meditative walking, calming, stretching, just different techniques to come into control with the power of your mind and your power of observation, and most importantly, your intuitive abilities to see, sense, and feel the right pathway for you. If you can learn to override your intellectual mind or the conditioning or beliefs that you've come into or gained in this lifetime, you actually then are able to step back and make choices, even in not understanding them in the moment, that will actually lead you to the next best possible path. Again, they want me to reiterate that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of pathways and solutions always at your fingertips and always available to you. And the ones that you will be able to see or not see are dependent upon your own belief systems, your own rigidity, and your own blocks that you have put on the path that don't allow you to move forward. So always here on this planet, in order for us to live a more optimal life or a life of least resistance, a life in alignment with our higher spiritual self and our guides and our angels, what is required is self-work and self-development. And the more that we spend time doing that, feeling guided to do that, and spending our time doing that, we are here to enjoy our life. Our life isn't meant to be difficult. It is possible that you go through things that we as humans have put labels on as difficult, things like heartaches and relationship breakups and losses and financial struggles and health crises and all sorts of different things. It is possible that we can go through those and easily transmute back out of them, because all they are frequency, right? Everything's frequency. That's why the angels and the work that I work with them, they call it angel frequency, because it's a frequency of energy that's being given to you, an opportunity to evolve your spiritual self or your energetic frequency, your light bodies, your energy, your aura, your chakras, everything within yourself to a higher level. So your matrix evolves to a higher level in order to have a more pleasurable life. And if you can let go of the belief of struggle or the belief that it has to be hard or difficult or people have to suffer, then it becomes much easier to transmute, transcend, dissolve through the difficulties of our life. And that's what the angels really have in mind for each one of us. And that is what they are always doing to try to help us live a better life, right? A happier, more joyful, more pleasurable life. That's their goal. So hopefully that sheds some light on, do they hear your pleas, whether they're verbal or they're outward or they're internal? Yes, they always do. They're always listening. They're always anticipating. And if you feel like you're not always getting the response you would like back from your angels, your spiritual guides, it's simply because you have free will and you're not getting into a space of alignment. And that space of alignment is just sometimes silence. It's just being in a quiet place and allowing that vibrational energy to shift. Now, a lot of times when I have worked with people and they get themselves really worked up about something, they're going through something very difficult. It's like they're trying to pull cards, they're trying to talk to their angels, they're trying to journal, maybe even they've booked a session with me, but it's like they're not really listening or hearing all that is being said or the signs that they're getting, or it's just like the cards are erratic or things like are not making sense. It's because they're in still this frantic frequency of energy, this chaos energy. And so it's like, well, what you're asking for is being met by the energy. And even if you got a really clear answer, you're not able to hear, see, or feel that answer because you're in an energy of chaos. But if I can get them to just, right, like release, and we've all been there. It happens a lot after, if anyone's ever had a really good cry and all of a sudden you're just kind of quiet. And then it's like you get these light bulb moments, right? It can come through something like, you're just exhaustion. Like you just ran 5 miles and you're exhausted, or you just cried for 15 minutes and now you're exhausted. Or it can come through very intended. That's not the word I want. I want to say intentionful, and that's not a word, but this is not common uncommon when I'm talking to the angels, because what they're trying to translate and what I'm picking up isn't the right word. But it comes through this very meaningful intention of just calming yourself down and learning a practice to just be still, just to be calm and just listen. And you will get to a point spiritually where you don't even have to go through processes of like asking and receiving, because you've already asked as soon as something happens. And if you just allow the universe to respond, it receives. And you base all of your knowing about this on the feelings that you have. So it becomes this just like normal day-to-day life at some point in your spiritual evolution. Okay, so that's what they have to say about that. If anyone has any questions or wants more clarity, you certainly can ask it after we make it through this first half. The other thing that they wanted to talk about, so this was something that one of my clients from many years I've known her wrote in with today and asked this question about a previous podcast episode she had listened to. She said, I was listening to it and I could almost not stay awake. I'm wondering if that's because of the frequency or what exactly is going on. And I think that is a really great question. So here is how I would like to answer that. Here's how the angels will answer that. Frequency and energy is very interesting. So when we are engaging with a frequency that is different than ours, we feel differently within our physical body. Oftentimes, if it's a lower frequency, we actually feel visceral effects. So we'll feel fearful, anxious, afraid, worried, uncomfortable. We often want to go away from it. We want to get up. We want to go away from it. We don't feel good in it unless you've become accustomed to it. And some people condition themselves in their frequency to be accustomed to lower frequencies, and then that feels normal to them. The thing that I will say to you is things that feel comfortable or normal are a vibrational match to where your frequency is at right now. Now, yes, frequency changes. It can go up and down all day long. You can be a pretty like high frequency happy person, and then something can activate a certain vibrational shift in you, like a trauma or something unresolved, or even maybe something that is resolved, but it's like it triggers something from the past, or something that's happened, or a belief you have, or something you don't like happens, and you can go into a lower frequency very quickly. I always say the goal is not to avoid, not to think that spiritual evolution or spiritual perfection or mastery means I no longer experience things I don't want, because sometimes we experience things we don't want in order to help increase our frequency or shift us to an even higher realm. However, I don't, we are not guided to go look for lower frequency events in our life. We need to be very mindful of what we expose ourselves to every single day. And when we can be very mindful of that, and we can be in high level frequencies frequently, regularly throughout the day, the week, the months, the years of our life, we continue to then no longer even bring into our physical experience lower frequencies. It just will not even be part of your life. And I feel like they tell you this every single week, right? It's like, let go of the need to believe that you have to live in lower level frequencies, but also know if you experience something unwanted or hard or difficult, it's not necessarily meaning that your overall perspective is really low frequency. It means there's something activated in you for multiple reasons. It can happen that's bringing your attention and awareness to something else that is there as an opportunity to transmute, transcend, dissolve this in order to then evolve even higher to a different frequency. Okay. So back to the question of my client who asked this question of not being able to stay awake during listening to something. It is extremely common to become tired or fall asleep or not be able to stay awake when you are dealing with a frequency that is at a higher evolutionary plane than your own. That's very common because it's like an entire shift in your energy. So if anyone has ever done like energy healing work or gone to like an all day like yoga intensive or something that we would consider very spiritual, it can be really common to want to fall asleep in it because we can't consciously process the energy shifts. It is also very common, and this is what the angels are telling me specifically happened for this person or this client that I have, and may also have happened for you at some time in your life, is that sometimes when our conscious mind doesn't want to listen to the spiritual guidance, we will fall asleep as a way for our subconscious to actually process that information differently without our conscious mind being in the way and help raise our vibrational frequency or shift what we believe. So it's going directly to the subconscious mind. Our auditory sense is the only one of our senses that never turns off. So when you fall asleep, your other senses kind of go dormant, but your auditory system always stays active. That's why mothers, mostly mothers, I could say it could apply to any new parent, but mostly mothers because of hormones and other programming, wake up often instantaneously when there's like small noises all night because their nervous system is regulated for protection of their infant or their child. And so they're very much aware of that all of the time. So again, the auditory system never really shuts off. So if our conscious mind, we go to sleep, we go out of our conscious stimulation when we're listening to something that has a higher spiritual frequency, it's a way that our spiritual self is bypassing what's happening physically in order to then process the spiritual guidance or the frequency energy into the subconscious mind in order to help us evolve or up level some of our belief systems. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So I feel like that's it. That's all they wanted to answer today or all they wanted to talk about. So as always, I'm going to stop recording. And if you have questions or other things you'd like to talk about tonight,